Well, I have some silver that I'm holding in my hand as we speak. Yes, I know about the movement. I hope they drive silver to 1,000, because I certainly own plenty of silver. I think it's probably unlikely. It's very difficult to do something like that with a huge commodity like silver. But I mean, it can be done. The Hunt brothers certainly drove the price of silver up an enormous amount. It can be done, and it has been done.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is Jim Rogers, very successful investor, best-selling author, Guinness Book World Record holder, co-founder of Quantum Fund and also Source Fund Management, and the creator of Rogers International Commodity Index. Jim Rogers, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here, Elijah. Nice to see you again.
Definitely. And also on the line today is our host, Dunnigan Kaiser, who has the first question for Jim.
Jim, it's a pleasure to have you on Liberty and Finance, and it's my first time to meet you and to be able to interview with you, so I'm honored. Thank you very much for coming on. One of the things I'd like us to focus on, if we could, at the start, is the unsustainable debt. I remember back in college, and that was decades and decades ago, one of my math teachers was talking about the only thing that large computers wouldn't be able to handle very soon would be the national debt. So we've been talking about and worrying about and concerned about the national debt for decades. My former channel was called Reluctant Preppers because people wanted to be aware and prepared for whatever threats and risks might be coming their way so that we can prepare our families. Should we be concerned about the debt that seems to be increasing at a faster rate than we've ever seen before? Or is this something that we'll be still complaining about decades from now? Or have we missed that point and we don't have that luxury anymore and it's going to become very real much sooner than that?
Well, Dunnigan, I will tell you, it's a good time to be old in America because the old people are getting the benefits of all this madness, but the young people are going to have to pay for it. It is not a good time to be a young American. I have two teenage kids. The problems that they're going to inherit are going to be unbearable. Many countries have done this in history. They have all gone into decline and had problems, recurring problems for many years. I don't like saying it since I'm an American and my daughters are Americans, but facts are facts. 100 years ago, the UK was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. They set out on this path. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. Literally, the IMF had to fly into London airport and bail them out. So they went from being the single most richest and powerful country in the world to bankrupt in 50 years. I don't think I'm going to be around in 50 years to see all of this.
One of the things when we think about the debt that really concerns people is that our currency isn't backed by anything. It used to be backed by gold, but now it's not backed by anything. So the Fed can just print as much money as they want and we can go into as much debt as we want. But the thing is that then there's the devaluation of the currency. And you've talked a lot about how, the dollar objectively, if we look at an objective standpoint, is not a good place to be, but people see it as a safe haven. What is your outlook for the dollar going forward?
Well, I own U.S. dollars because when the next turmoil comes, when the next crisis comes, people will seek a safe haven. There are not many things left except the U.S. dollar. It's not a safe haven, but people think it is, so they will flee there. It will go up. It will get overpriced. I hope I'm smart enough to sell. It might even turn into a bubble, depending on how bad the crisis is. But Elijah, I don't see many more times in the future when the U.S. dollar can have a period of great strength because the debt is so staggering And in Washington, they're increasing the debt at unbelievable rates. It's never been done in the history of the world, not in recorded history of the world anyway. And this cannot end well. It's never ended well for anybody else, and it cannot end well for us.
Jim, you mentioned the bubble that might happen in the currency itself, but there are those saying we're in the bubble of everything. The equities are in a bubble, and debts are in a bubble, and real estate's in a bubble. Now people are starting to talk about the growing commodities that are finally coming out of a doldrums. What are your views of the most egregious bubbles that exist right now and that people might not be aware of? And is it too late for people to find safety to jump off of that? Or is there still more growth ahead? And how safe are people who are investing their nest egg, their futures on the existing bubble of everything?
Well, the bond market worldwide is a gigantic bubble. Bonds have never been this expensive in the history of the world, anywhere in the world. So we've never seen anything like this bubble. So that's bubble number one, and perhaps the biggest. Property in many places, as you point out. Seoul, New Zealand, many places, property is in a bubble. Not everywhere, but we're certainly having property bubbles develop. Shares are developing bubbles. Not all shares. In America, things like Amazon go up every day. Google and 10 cent. In Asia, Samsung, these stocks go up every day. But many stocks around the world are not in bubbles yet, but I can see it forming. I can see all the signs. The only thing I can see that's not a bubble, the cheapest asset class, commodities. Silver's down 50% from its all-time high. Oil is down 50%. Sugar's down 70%. Some of the prices in these commodities historically are remarkable, if not unbelievable. So the only thing I can see where there's not a bubble is commodities. Some things are starting to go up. Copper's now made an all-time high, but we're told we're all going to have electric vehicles in the future. Well, electric vehicles use several times as much copper as a regular car. So I don't know if that's a bubble. If the reality is the huge demand, then I don't see how you can call copper a bubble, given that production is not going up.
If I could just tag a follow-up question to tie two things you've said in your last two sections together. When you talked about the increase of the debt and the risks towards the dollar and other fiat currencies, but now you're talking about how commodities are a relative value given that most of them haven't reached their former all-time highs. We're talking about nominal highs there. So could you help make clear to our viewers and to me that when we talk about like silver being half its all-time high or that sort of thing, that we're talking about devalued currency. So isn't the picture even a lot more extreme than how you painted it?
Well, that's a valid point. The all-time high on silver was about $50 an ounce. It's about 25, 26 US an ounce. But when silver made its old highs, the dollar was worth a whole lot more than it is now. So who knows, on an adjusted basis, the old high in silver, I don't know, 60, 80, I don't know, I have no idea. But no, there's no question. So adjusted for what's happened to the currencies, most commodities are even cheaper than just the nominal value.
And yeah, you mentioned the undervaluation of commodities we're seeing right now, especially you mentioned silver being 50% of its all-time high, which is pretty crazy when it comes to, commodities in general. Now, specifically with silver, it seems like something that a lot of people have missed for many years. Some people have been interested in silver, but most of the population hasn't. But recently we've been seeing this movement to buy physical silver. It's called the SilverSqueeze. And also there's this group online called Wall Street Silver that is largely behind this move. What is your perspective on this movement, the SilverSqueeze, and really a lot of young people getting into the silver market, desiring to buy something that you can hold in your hand, actually have wealth outside the system?
Well, I have some silver that I'm holding in my hand as we speak. Yes, I do have some in the closet and under the bed. I'm an old peasant. When things go bad, I want to own some silver and some gold in the closet. Now, the politicians and the academics say, nah, silver and gold are worthless. Don't bother. Well, all of us old peasants know that when things collapse, we better have some gold and silver under the bed. So I have some, and I will buy more sometime in the future. I have no idea when. I know about the movement. I hope they drive silver to 1,000, because I certainly own plenty of silver. I think it's probably unlikely. It's very difficult to do something like that with a huge commodity like silver, but I mean, it can be done. The Hunt brothers certainly drove the price of silver up an enormous amount. It can be done, and it has been done. If they do it, more power to them. If it gets too high, I'll have to sell. I don't want to sell my silver. I want it for my children, but I'm aware of it. Squeezing the price of silver, which is a huge international commodity, will be difficult, but more power to it. The Hunt brothers did it.
On that topic of how difficult it is, there's been a lot of concern about potential for extreme physical shortness or shortfall or tightness on some of the major exchanges, metals exchanges, as well as some of the major metal funds. There's been a lot of concern that people who are holding ETF shares, or that think they are participating in silver, or unallocated or pool allocated funds that supposedly have silver backing them, that in all of those categories there may be an extreme physical shortage. Recently, just last week, in fact, we had the LBMI come out and say that they had some incorrect accounting. They had to update to the tune of over 3,000 tons. They had been overstating in the past. What's your view on the physical shortage of metals on the major exchanges and ETFs and so on? And do you think that it's significant? Do you think it's important? It's going to impact the price action or real people's ability to get their hands on physical metal?
Then again, I have absolutely no idea. I've never gone down to the vaults and done the audit. I mean, I hope somebody does, including I hope the ETFs and the exchanges do. Hooray if it's not actually there. That means the price will go higher and higher. As I say, I own silver and gold. I hope I have an opportunity to buy more before this is over, but there could well be physical shortages. I just don't know. I haven't done the audit. Please, somebody go down and do the audit, then we'll know. Of course, if they do the audit and they find out it's not there, it'll be too late, because the prices will be going straight through the roof.
And you mentioned earlier how in times of crisis, people know that gold and silver are money. It's interesting, though, how a lot of people have forgotten that in the time right now where people are just, their assets are all in the system. It's all digital. We asked viewers to submit questions, and one of the questions here is from a viewer named Fat Vegan, and they're wanting to know, what will it take for all of America to recognize that gold and silver are the only true money?
Well, if and when there's a currency collapse and or a government collapse, throughout history, all of us peasants know gold and silver, we better have some gold and silver, because that's the only thing that's going to save us. Maybe some wheat will save us. Maybe loaves of bread will save us, but gold and silver is more likely to be the same thing. Yes, when things collapse, people know. I mean, there's some kind of innate historical memory that people realize how to save themselves. If and when the U.S. dollar collapses, which is probably going to happen, maybe not in my lifetime, but probably in my daughter's lifetime, people will know they got to have some real assets in order to survive. I mean, Elijah, this is not the first rodeo I've seen. This has happened throughout history, and I presume it will continue to happen throughout history.
We have a question on what you do see happening next from Chetan Yadav, who says, does Jim see a secular inflation or a deflationary bust first?
Well, we're already having inflation. I mean, if anybody who shops, you know there's inflation. The government says there's no inflation, but the government lies about it. All governments, and they have reason to lie. Practical reasons. As you know, many government obligations are tied to the inflation rate. So if they say there's no inflation, they don't have to pay as much. So they all have reasons to lie, and they do. Anybody who shops knows there's inflation. Look at entertainment, anything, education, food. Restaurants, you know that there's inflation out there, and it's going to get worse. Throughout history, when we've had huge amounts of money printing, I mean, it's very simple. It has always led to inflation. Maybe it won't this time for some reason, but it always has, and I suspect it will. We will probably eventually have a deflationary bust. There's no question. It's always worked that way. You have huge inflation, it eventually gets popped for whatever reason, and then there's a huge deflationary bust. I suspect that will happen again. Maybe somehow the federal Washington can somehow get prices down and drive prices down into deflation. But the problem with that scenario is central banks and politicians don't like deflation because they lose their jobs. So they do everything they can to print, borrow, spend. Look at what's happening now. You think that the Federal Reserve is going to wake up one day and say, okay, we made a mistake. We're not going to print huge amounts of money now. We're not going to spend all this money. We're not going to borrow all this money. I cannot imagine a single politician in Washington saying that. Maybe one would, and maybe she would get elected because it's sound policy. But within 6 months, she would be assassinated or thrown out of office because people would say, no, this is too much pain. I don't want to suffer like this. And they would go back to inflation. Inflation's the easy way, and inflation has always been the way unless it gets out of control.
Now, you mentioned the possibility of deflation, but really how inflation seems to be more popular, especially, with voters and politicians. But the same viewer, Chetan Yadav, is wanting to know, if we do see inflation, how would gold react to that? How do you see gold and silver reacting to deflation if that's what we see?
Deflation? Well, normally when markets collapse, and if there's deflation, nearly everything goes down a lot. And normally when you have huge bear markets, everything goes down, including gold and silver. Go back in previous bear markets in the last century or two, whenever there's been a big bear market, gold and silver have gone down at least for a while. Eventually, when the money printing starts again, they always go up and go through the roof, and are great ways to protect yourself. But if there's gigantic deflation, most all assets will go down at least for a while.
You mentioned a couple of times earlier that you are personally a holder of physical gold and silver. In fact, you showed us some. But as a tool to help people balance or hedge or insure or protect their assets, their portfolio, their retirement, their future, they always tend to ask us what's the appropriate portion or percentage of their overall investment mix that they should allocate to gold and silver. And we've heard a range of opinions about that, but like to hear your philosophy on that.
Then again, if you don't know what gold and silver are, if you're like Elijah's, the earlier questioner, you probably shouldn't own much at all because you don't even know what it is. And I would not encourage anyone to invest in something that I don't know what they're doing. In my view, though, everyone should own some gold and silver as an insurance policy, if nothing else, even if you know little about it. Most of us have health insurance. We don't know much about it, but we know we have it. We hope we never need it. Well, I consider gold and silver the same way. If you know a lot about gold and silver, and if you know what you're doing, there may come a time when you want all of your money in gold and silver. I do not have all of my money in gold and silver, but I could conceive of a time like that down the road if the whole thing collapses. I mean, if there's war and depression and everything else, then the only thing to own might be gold and silver. That is not my position at the moment. So it depends on what you know, how much you know, and your own position. I mean, I cannot answer that. I, anyway, cannot answer that question. Maybe you or Elijah can answer that question. But it depends on one's level of knowledge and situation.
I think that's a good point. It definitely, you have to be knowledgeable about what you invest in. And this kind of gets to our next question from Robert Baker is he asks, you spend a lot of time in China. How does the average Chinese citizen view gold as compared to the American citizen?
Well, for a long time, under Mao Zedong and the communists, there was virtually no gold or silver anywhere except in some jewelry. Now, of course, the Chinese are very capitalistic, and they have gold shops everywhere, silver shops everywhere, and there are many Chinese citizens have bought and do own gold and silver and will continue to. You can buy gold and silver on the futures exchanges in China now, which you certainly couldn't do under Mao Zedong. So they are learning, and they have more examples of their own history where the currencies have collapsed and gone. They've been around a lot longer than we have. So they anecdotally, and they have this historic memory, we better own some gold and silver. And I'm always amazed at how many gold and silver shops there are in China now. It's not like America, I don't think. I mean, I haven't done a study, but they are learning pretty quickly.
Wanted to follow up with you on something that you alluded to earlier, because again, our viewers are quite interested in what they can do to be prepared and take care of their families going forward. A lot of the comments we see under our interview sometimes say, forget about gold and silver. When the time comes, you're just going to need food. Food's going to be where it's at. How about agriculture or agricultural growing land, that sort of thing, farmable land? Could you talk to us about what part you believe that either participating directly in your own, raising your own food, or investing in some form of agriculture makes sense to people who are concerned about their future and reliability of their financial fortunes going forward?
Well, I'm very I'm very bullish on agriculture going forward now. It's been a disaster for a long time, but Duncan, I'm not going to go buy a land and become a farmer. I'd be hopeless at it. I can tell you that agriculture's got a great future, but I'd be a terrible farmer. I'd go broke, even in a great bull market. So don't do it unless you know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing, go buy yourself a farm. You'll be very, very successful. Your agricultural land will go up, your prices will go, everything will go up, and you'll be very successful. Or you can buy, there are other ways to do it. You can buy land, you can lease it to a good farmer, you can buy agricultural stocks, you can buy commodities, agricultural commodities. I own an ETF, an agricultural commodity ETF on the New York Stock Exchange, because by definition, if you have inflation, the price of real goods goes up. The price of cotton and lead and zinc, they all go up. So it depends on how much you know and your own way to prepare and do it. But if you like the outdoors and you like getting dirty and you like the sun, go buy yourself a farm and become a farmer. Now, you do have to be careful because, if and when the whole system collapses, and I don't think it's going to get that bad, but it has in some countries, you're going to have people coming and invading your house and say, give us your food. They'll look out and they'll see that you've got corn growing out there, and they'll come and invade and demand you share.
You bring a lot of interesting points there. And I think when it comes to the theme of kind of protecting yourself, maybe protecting yourself with agriculture, there's also other ways we can protect ourselves. And we've really seen in the last year and a half this event of COVID that's just kind of shocked people, saying, I really do need to prepare a bit more, where preparedness was kind of a fringe thing before, but now it's more mainstream. This viewer is wanting to know about like your perspective on the risks still associated with COVID. It seems like we're kind of, the vaccine is rolling out and we might have seen the worst of it, but your perspective on the current COVID situation and how to prepare for kind of maybe some unexpected events relating to COVID in the near future.
Well, I live in Singapore. I got 2 vaccinations. Because I thought it would help me travel. I have a piece of paper that says I have been vaccinated, so I hope it will help me travel. Turns out it doesn't help. It's not very useful in that regard. That's why the main reason I got the vaccinations. Well, if the vaccinations work, then obviously that will help with the whole world. If everybody gets vaccinated, I don't know how long that would take, then we would solve this problem if the vaccinations work. And I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But I hope so. But that's going to take a while to solve that problem. I live in Singapore, and Singapore just yesterday closed down again. The schools are closed, the restaurants are closed, everything, the offices are closed, everything is closed again. And Singapore has had very few deaths in the last year and a half. Singapore, at least statistically, if you can believe any government, has done a good job. But now here we are closed down again. So how long is this going to take, Elijah? I have no idea.
I think that does get to the kind of unpredictable nature of it, where, yeah, in different parts of the world, we see completely different reaction by government. I mean, in Singapore, they're closing down again, as you mentioned. Here in Arizona, where I live, everything's opening up. There's pretty much no restrictions from the government. But yeah, it definitely does seem unpredictable, and things can change very quickly.
Well, part of the problem is because most governments are incompetent. They have no clue what's going on. The American government in January of 2020 said, there's no problem. Don't worry. Don't do anything. Everything is under control, which, of course, was totally incorrect. And America suffered greatly because of that. But I'm not just picking on that particular government. Most governments don't have a clue what they're doing. History's pretty clear that most governments don't know what they're doing about anything.
On that topic of whether those in control or trying to be in control or trying to represent themselves as being in control actually know what they're doing or can be effective, a lot of our viewers are watching the Federal Reserve and wondering if this touted tool they've referred to as yield curve control can tame this debt bubble beast that you've been describing. Do you believe that they've already been doing yield curve control in some form or another? If so, how? Or that it's even possible to do it effectively and in a way that's really going to impact and preserve or prolong stability going forward? Or do you think it's a recipe for disaster?
Then again, whatever it is, it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, look at the numbers. America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. No nation in the history of the world has ever been as deeply in debt as the U.S. is, and it goes higher and higher every day. They're printing money as fast as they can. They're borrowing money as fast as they can, whatever they're doing. I have never known any country in history that has done this, that has come out and said, wow, okay, everything is fine now. Whatever they're doing, I do not know any example in history where it has been successful. One of the problems of history, of course, is we don't learn the lessons of history. It doesn't matter. I can say, first of all, most of us don't know history, and even then, if we do know history, we ignore it. We don't learn the lessons of history, and we pay the price.
All right. Well, Jim Rogers, we really appreciate your time today and sharing your insights and really getting that view that a lot of people don't hear about, and that's so important. A view with a lot of experience, and you do have a lot of experience in investing and economics and all of that. And we really do appreciate all your insights and your time today. Before we let you go, where can our viewers find you, and any last thoughts you'd like to add?
I would just say, Elijah, I make a lot of mistakes. Don't think I don't get it wrong at times. I've made many mistakes in my life, so everybody needs to be careful. Everybody needs to do their research, because we're probably going to have some very bad times sometime in the next few years or decade or whatever. Just be prepared.
All right. Once again, Jim Rogers, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
My pleasure. Thanks. Let's do it again sometime.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded. For physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs, excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.